part 2 of Effective Screencast, the top 6 killers. These are the top 6 killers, that is, pitfalls that will kill the effectiveness of your screencast. The number 1 killer is too much information on a slide, or as your students might say, TMI, dude. When you give too much information on a slide, students get discouraged and they stop taking notes. The challenge of any presentation is to not show all the information you have, but instead to select the right information to present to your audience. Whittle down, and then whittle down some more. Garr Reynolds, another great teacher to learn about presenting effectively from, has a great blog. It's called Presentation Zen, and you can find it at the URL at the top of this slide, presentationzen.blogs.com. I often read this blog. It gives a lot of useful information. Garr used to work for Apple, and now he's a marketing professor at a Japanese university. Reynolds gave Steve Jobs presentation lessons when he was working for Apple. One of the first articles I was impressed by that Garr wrote was a comparison of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates' methods of presentations. For those of you who know that I'm a huge fan of Steve Jobs and lover of all things Apple, let me just say that the purpose of this comparison isn't to poke fun of Bill Gates' style, but to learn from his mistakes. Let's first look at Bill Gates' presentation style. Sorry, Bill, you just haven't learned how to effectively use your own presentation software yet. There are way too many words on this slide, difficult vocabulary, long sentences, and way too many bullet points. Atkinson says that, quote, bullet points create obstacles between presenters and audiences, unquote. Bullets tend to make our presentations formal and stiff and serve to dumb down our talking points. And they leave the audience being confused and bored. Atkinson recommends presenters embrace the art of storytelling and that visuals, that is slides, be used smoothly and simply to enhance the speaker's points as they tell their story. Now here, Gates is trying to explain his live strategy. There's a lot of images and a lot of text. Good graphic design guides the viewer and has a clear hierarchy of order so that she or he knows where to look first, second, and so on. What is the communication priority of this visual? Perhaps it is the circle of clip art, but that doesn't help us out much, does it? But here it gets worse. What can we say but, wow? Bill Gates says, quote, and this slide really pulls it all together, unquote. You decide. Does it? Does it really? I'm lost when I look at it. Garr Reynolds says change in presentation skills will continue to be slow, especially when the executives of the company, which produced the most popular slideware program in the world, use the program in the most uninspiring, albeit typical, way. I say, ugh. In contrast, Steve Jobs was a master of using his own presentation software, Keynote. Here he is discussing the iPod's features at the Macworld Expo in 2007. Steve speaks in simple, short sentences using simple vocabulary. Steve uses very simple slides, mostly images, without bullet points. A text analysis of Steve Jobs' 2007 Macworld Expo keynote and Bill Gates' 2007 International Consumer Electronics Show presentation show the following results. Note that the Gunning-Fogg Index is the number of years of education that a person needs to grasp the paragraph. Clearly, a fifth grader could understand Steve's presentations. You'd have to be at the end of your sophomore year of high school to understand what Bill Gates had to say in his presentation. Garr Reynolds points out that a key tenet of the Zen aesthetic is kanzo, or simplicity. In the kanzo concept, beauty, grace, and visual elegance are achieved by elimination and omission. I had the joy of watching Steve Jobs present live one time at a Macworld conference in San Francisco. I noticed that in his presentation, Steve Jobs allowed the screen to fade completely and be entirely empty at appropriate short moments while he told a story. As a musician, I would compare this to a great music performance, where much of the real power of the music comes from the space in between the notes. That is, the rest. This piece of music notation has practically no rest and sounds incredibly busy. The silence, that is, the rest in a piece of music, gives more substance and meaning to the notes when they are played. Amateur improvisers and composers never realize that silence is so important in making excellent music. Likewise, a blank screen from time to time also makes images appear stronger and gives them more impact when they do appear. Did you know that in PowerPoint and Keynote, you can intentionally go to a blank screen by hitting B on your keyboard for black or W on your keyboard for white? Anytime you are in slideshow mode, that is play mode, in either PowerPoint or Keynote, this trick will work to achieve a blank screen and grab the attention of the audience. For most presenters, a crowded slide is a crutch, or at least a security blanket. The thought of allowing the screen to become completely empty is scary to some. Now all eyes are on you. Don't sweat it. In Screencast, a blank screen can redirect the listener's attention to what you're saying, and thus lead the oral senses to much more focus for a moment. Using this trick too long or too often can lead to boredom, but in the right dose, it can provide focus and concentration. Of course, body language is important too. This image shows a comparison of speakers in the keynote presentation at a Macworld conference. Viewers writing in on live blogs during the conference were writing comments such as blah blah blah, and please get this guy off stage, for the executive from Singular shown in the bottom image. By all means, when presenting live, don't read your slides to the audience unless it is an important quote that you fear you may misquote. When screencasting with a talking head, do not read your slides to the viewer, and don't read your notes with your head down. If you must read in the talking head portion of your video, then use a teleprompter. We'll discuss teleprompter tools a little later on in this course. Remember, the viewer is watching you if you choose to use a talking head. If you're not using a talking head in a screencast, then you can read your slides because the viewer can't see you or your body language. However, at least try to read your slides with a lilt in your voice, so you can avoid sounding monotone and unengaging. Practice reading your script before recording to be more effective in this area. The number 2 killer is bad font usage. It's very important that you use a font size that everyone can read. When presenting live, you want the back of the room viewer to be able to easily see anything you have on a slide. When recording a screencast, you want your viewers to be able to read everything on your slides as well, especially if the video won't be displayed in full screen mode. Your font should not be smaller than 20 points for your slides unless you don't care that the viewers see the content. For example, a page number at the corner of your presentation slide doesn't really matter and could be less than 20 points. But in general, it's best to use the sizes that are given on the master slides of your presentation software. For example, the master slide suggests 36 to 44 points for titles and 28 to 32 for bullet points. Note that even embedded bullet points are not less than 20 on the master. Let's talk about types of fonts. First, there are serif fonts. They have curls, small appendices, at the end of each letter. These appendices have the purpose of helping the reader's eyes connect all the sequence of letters and movement from line to line. Serif fonts are mostly used in newspapers and books when the text is small and typed. Displayed here is the most popular serif font, Times New Roman. Notice the curls and ornamental touches at the end of the letters, which is very typical of a serif font. Popular serif fonts include Times New Roman, Cambria, Garamond, Palatino, Lucida Bright, and all other fonts characterized by tiny appendices at the end of their forms. Each of these fonts are shown here in the same 64-point font size in regular style. Notice how the spacing and boldness is different for them. Serif fonts are excellent for reading printed material, but not so great for screen presentations. Try to avoid them. Sans serif fonts, from the French word sans that means without, are all those fonts that have letters with straight lines and no curls or appendices. Their letter form is neat, defined, clean, and very readable. They're especially good for colored text against colored backgrounds. Serif fonts tend to be a problem in slide presentations unless they're just used with a white background and dark text. Sans serif fonts are definitely more readable than serif fonts in Screencast and work with a variety of text colors and slide backgrounds. The bottom line, use sans serif fonts in your screencasts. Sans serif fonts include Arial, Trebuchet, Verdana, Helvetica, Calibri, and all other fonts characterized by clean letter forms. Note again that each of these fonts are shown here in the same 64 font size in regular style as it was displayed when we looked at the serif fonts. Notice how the spacing and boldness is different for these 5 as well as from the serif font types. By the way, in subjective tests measuring how people judge the screen readability of different typefaces, most people prefer Trebuchet, with Verdana running a close second in that poll. I'm not particularly a fan of Verdana because of its odd spacing, and would take Helvetica any day of the week. One of the biggest mistakes in font usage is not using a master slide. People who fail to use a master slide generally lack consistency in their font usage. You know the types. One bullet point is in Arial font, and then the next bullet point is in Times New Roman. Oh, that drives me crazy. A lot of people don't even know you can set up a master slide to provide consistency for your font usage. Not only does using a master save time in setting up your slides, it avoids embarrassing font mistakes in your screencast. Save time and provide consistency to your presentation. Use a master slide. This doesn't mean you need to totally limit yourself with fonts. Yes, you should use a consistent font throughout your presentation, but sometimes you need to use a different font for effect. Specialty fonts such as these can be used for effect, but shouldn't be used for an entire presentation. My friend Patrick Crispin, a fellow instructional designer at USC, says, quote, "Friends don't let friends use Comic Sans." Well, unless you're a kindergarten teacher, then it's allowed, unquote. You should also refrain from using all caps in a presentation. Use caps for effect only. People tend to feel that all caps represent shouting, and you don't want your viewers to feel like you're shouting at them. Here's a word in all caps with 50% blocked out. Do you know what the word is? Maybe you do. Here's the same word in lowercase with the same 50% blocked out. How about now? Do you know what the word is without a doubt? My guess is that you would be more willing to bet $100 that you're right about this word in lowercase than the one we saw in all caps. Notice that the lowercase word has a much more distinctive shape because of the ascenders and the descenders on the D and the G. All caps takes information away and makes text harder to read. All caps has its place, of course. Its purpose is to slow down the reader. Use all caps sparingly on a slide because there are very few times you want to slow down a reader on a slide. Your goal in screencasts is to have them read the text quickly so they can focus their attention upon what you have to say. A mixture of upper and lowercase usage helps the viewer to read more quickly than using all caps. Fonts are more than a typeface. They can also provide emotion. This one is sort of cutesy. Here's the same sentence with a different font. This font might remind you of Snoopy at the typewriter. It provides a different mood. Here's the same sentence again, but this font is a little scarier. My point is, find the best typeface to meet your mission for meaning, but be sure to use specialty type fonts judiciously. This is a demonstration of how background color, font selection, and font color can provoke a feeling. On this slide, the red against the black might conjure pictures in the viewer's head of the prelude sentence to the entrance in a novel of a serial killer writing this sentence in blood. It's a bit more spooky and obtains the desired emotional effect. The number 3 killer is poor color and contrast. What is she doing, you ask? She's talking about color and contrast, and I can hardly read her slide. Even though this is a 72-point sans serif font, it's hard to read because there isn't any contrast between the gradient black background and the purple text. Color usage and contrast is very important. Color won't save a boring presentation, but it will give an emotional effect or help add focus. The general rule of thumb for live projected presentations is this. In a dark lecture hall, use a dark background with light-colored text. In a bright lecture hall, use a light-colored background with dark text. In general for screencasts, most viewers prefer to view a dark background with light-colored text. It's a bit easier on the eyes when viewing from a computer screen. The number 4 killer, busy tables and charts. The last thing you want to throw your audience when you're trying to drive home a point is a busy table like this that they can't possibly digest quickly. A busy table will distract them from listening to you. Stay away from complicated tables and charts. If you must use something like this, take care to highlight or circle the area of importance to the viewer. Simple charts like this are best for getting your point across. It only takes a glance to figure this chart out. This chart isn't quite as simple, and it could use some improvement by changing the serif fonts to sans serif, but it's still not as hard to digest the data in this chart as in the first spreadsheet. The number 5 killer, bad use of transitions. You can always tell a newbie to presentation software by their usage of transitions and animations. Usually there is overkill in this area with beginners. Have you seen someone do this? I could go on with this, but I'll spare you. At least Keynote's transitions are less irritating than PowerPoint's, but they can still be overdone. If you must use transitions, then stay with the same one throughout, and pick one that is not too overdone. I repeat, if you must use transitions, use the same transition throughout the entire presentation. Have you ever watched Charter Cable's PowerPoints on Channel 21 here in San Luis Obispo? Their use of transitions makes me go into a tizzy. It really frazzles my aesthetic senses. The number 6 killer, poor use of animations. One of the best usages of animations is to bring in your bullet points. If you must use bullet points, bring them in one by one in order to keep the audience's attention about what you're going to say next. Bringing in your bullet points gradually prevents the audience from reading ahead of you. Studies show that if people are reading, they can't listen closely. Put as little text up at one time as we've seen before so that they can quickly be done with reading and listen to what you have to say. How about this? Have you ever seen someone do this before? Did I drive you crazy yet? I tried to pick the most obnoxious assortment of animations I could find. Please, don't be obnoxious with your animations. Consider adjusting the opacity of your animations after the fact. For example, suppose you're talking about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief, and you want to highlight the stages one by one as you speak. One effective way is to use animations from the software to bring the current topic to the forefront and fade the other topics by adjusting the opacity on the build-out, like this. Another thing you can do is to use transition effects and scaling to get this result, putting the emphasis on the final thought as you saw there. This example shows how you can take a recording of a reading, in this case a recording of Maya Angelou, and time the animations of your slides so that the words she's speaking stand out visually.
I speak more softly and choose my words more carefully. There are more yes ma'ams and no ma'ams and yes sirs and no sirs in my conversation. Out of my heart, out of my brain, more thank yous slide across my tongue. I am blessed. I am in church.
Professor Michael Black, who teaches biology at Cal Poly, uses animations to illustrate complicated and important concepts. He also inserts review questions, such as true and false questions, and he has them stop, think, and predict before he shows them the answer. Throw in some questions now and then to keep them thinking, not dozing. Note that the Windows version of Camtasia actually allows you to insert an assessment right within your video that students can take to demonstrate their understanding of the principles you just discussed. This is the end of part 2 of this presentation. Please move on to part 3, where we will discuss the use of imagery to create more powerful, more effective screencasts.